So Dr. Helen Fisher, she put madly in love people inside functional MRI brain scanners to find out what romantic love is. Is that a futile exercise? Is she missing the point?
Well, she already knew that they were madly in love, and that's why she selected them. And to me, that's just the sort of the beginning of the process. The brain is a critical part of it. See, the science of consciousness needs to be a science of context. We are not isolated. We are never isolated. We never have been isolated. None of us, except perhaps in extreme, unfortunate cases that we can think of, are isolated. And to talk about somebody's being in love or madly in love is not to describe some chemical state about them. It's to describe something, it's to begin a story or to imply a story about their lives. That implies much more than just their brains. Given that they are in love, it might be interesting to ask whether there are internal correlates of that state. But to say that there might be correlates of that state is not to say that any internal condition is that in which that state consists, or that any internal condition, to use a little bit of philosophy jargon, that any internal condition could be alone sufficient for that state.
Okay. Dr. Burton, no, that's good. Dr. Burton, you're an MD, you're a science writer, you're a novelist. So you've approached this problem from every hemisphere of your brain. I just read your book on being certain, believing when you're not. And I don't even know how to believe anything now, except that it's a brilliant book. Everyone with a strong opinion should read this book. Dr. Burton, if our beliefs about the world are so controlled by these unconscious processes you elucidate, what aspect of us is conscious at all?
You talking to me?
Yeah. You weren't conscious of what I was saying. That's your answer.
Well, actually, I wanted to answer something about what Alva said.
Please do. I encourage our panelists to engage with each other.
By way of answering yours, I'd like to talk about the slime mold. Since I just read about it last week for the first time. Slime mold lives under good circumstances as a unicellular organism. It exists by itself, it eats, breathes, dies. But under bad circumstances, it merges together with a bunch of other unicellular organisms to form a separate entity, which is the slime mold itself. And it goes out and finds food. Now, the interesting thing is, if you go on the YouTube, you can watch the slime mold actually solving a maze problem. You give it a labyrinth, it does as well as a rat. But slime mold, on one hand, is considered not an animal, it's considered a vegetable, it's a fungus. And other people say, well, it's an animal because it makes behavior. But the fact of the matter is, it lives in two circumstances. One which is unicellular, and the other which is up to 100,000, all in a group, signaling to each other. The interesting thing is they have, as you might say, no consciousness, but they collectively have intention. Now, we can't ask them how they're feeling, so we really don't know whether there is any consciousness in there, but to all intents and purposes, this is a plant with behavior. And they do it by having a chemical that they release called cyclic AMP, which we all have. What happens is they find out they're hungry, one guy releases cyclic AMP, it spreads around in the petri dish or whatever to its neighbors. They start to secrete it and it becomes a positive feedback loop. There is no leader, there's no instruction, and there's intentional behavior. Now, that's a model at the lowest level of existence. So if we move all the way up to what humans are, what consciousness is, you asked the question, how does it get there from? Beats me. But I will tell you one little anecdote, just because this is obviously supposed to be about science, but I think science has its limitations. There was a study done many years ago in which people in Lithuania who were in rear-end automobile accidents were interviewed to see if they'd had the symptoms. And they took several hundred people who from cars were wrecked, and they went and interviewed them, and none of them had any symptoms following the accident. And there's no litigation in Lithuania. On the other hand, in America, they took the same group of people, and there's like a 20-30% incidence of all kinds of symptoms. So I said, I'm biased. I've got all these preconceived notions about why one group, which the laughter is self-explanatory, you think the mechanism must be something to do with litigation, because it's the one variable. So I phoned up a buddy back east who's a headache expert, and I asked him, what do you think the difference is? He says, that's your problem. I said, what do you mean? He says, you're hung up on mechanism. he said, that's the way we always think, is in terms of mechanism, and that's where we stop. So, you asked me a question, I think, about consciousness. I think perhaps we have to rethink what we mean by the word mechanism. Alva suggests it's outside the body. If you're watching these slime molds, you might say, wow, they have some sort of purpose and intention as a group that they don't have individually. So they're getting information from outside themselves, which perhaps is a corollary to Alva's talking.
Do we even know how to ask this question, what is consciousness?
We know how to ask it. We don't know if it's the right question. I mean, we're really good at asking questions that are of no value. You mean like the one?
Yeah, that's what I do for a living.
Right.
You're a professional confuser.
That's right.